How's it going, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Fash for Fash. In this episode, I'm going to be teaching you guys everything you need to know about throwing jerkbaits so you can catch giant trout with them. As a lot of you guys know, I like to use jerkbaits for a lot of my trout fishing. I think it's the most affordable and most efficient way to catch the biggest trout in the creek. In this video, I'm going to be explaining to you why you should use jerkbaits, how you should use jerkbaits, when you should use jerkbaits, and where you should. Make sure to fish responsibly with the information I'm about to give you. Some pretty top secret stuff, so stay tuned for that. You'll learn everything you need to know. Also, make sure to watch the end of the video for some epic underwater footage. One last thing is, if you're new to this channel, please go down below and support me and subscribe to this channel. There'll be a ton of great fishing content coming in the future. I'm going to try to upload every Sunday. Make sure to go down below also and like this video if you enjoy it, if you learned something new. And if I missed something, make sure to go down in the comment section and tell me. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Without any further ado, let me teach you guys how to catch some trout. First, let's get into why you want to use jerkbaits. Foremost, this is what I found to be hands down the most efficient way to catch big trout overall, specifically for wild brown trout. Let's go over some of the pros versus the cons. Covering water. You'll be constantly casting and moving through a ton of water with your jerkbait. Fish's vision. Trout have incredible vision to spot tiny nymphs and midges, but they'll be able to spot a jerkbait from a mile away and see it in dirty water. Convincing presentations. Aggressive wild trout rarely pass up a jerkbait if their conditions are right and there isn't too much fishing pressure. Now for the cons. Treble hooks. As many of you know, treble hooks have a bad reputation in the trout fishing community due to the damage they can cause. In order to avoid this, you can switch them out for single hooks, use a split ring plier, and replace the treble with a single hook that's roughly the width of the treble. Easily snagged and lost and broken. I've gone through over $40 worth of lures in a single day. Sometimes piggy fish won't budge. Many fish, especially pressured stockfish, will refuse to chase a jerkbait. That's when fly fishing comes into play. Also, in my opinion, jerkbait fishing isn't quite as fun as fly fishing, although streamer fishing is very similar. Overall, I think the pros far outweigh the cons. You should at least try jerkbaits out because you aren't limited to only one fishing method. I'll make sure to at least keep my fly rod in my car, and I have an arsenal of different trout fishing lures in my bag. Now let's move right into the how. Let me explain to you how I fish with these jerkbaits. First, let's go over my setup and what I recommend. Currently, I have a Shimano Nasky 1000 size reel swivel 6-pound test. I recommend reels in the 500 to 1500 size category. Shimano offers some excellent low budget reels, and reels like the Sienna and Sedona are all you need and work great for their price. Like I said, I use 6-pound test, which is my recommended overall line strength for targeting trout and jerkbaits. Although ideally, I think it's much nicer to use 4-pound in smaller creeks. In tiny creeks, you can even go down to 2-pound, and in large rivers, I recommend all the way up to 8. Most of the time, these fish will not see your line because they are honed in on hitting your lure. For my rod, I have a 6'6" St. Croix Trout series. This rod is ultralight and fast action. I recommend any rod that is 6 to 7 feet and is ultralight to light and fast action. You want a longer rod that can cast lures far and accurate, and also load up nicely while being firm enough while a trout smacks a jerkbait. There are many different types and variations of jerkbaits. Most jerkbaits can be worked in different ways that all work well for trout. For example, the X-Wrap, a very popular jerkbait, can be straight retrieved without any jerking motion and is very effective in that manner because the trout have an easier time tracking it down and not missing it. If the trout is in an aggressive mood, as the name suggests, lure can be aggressively jerked on its retrieval. A steady twitch is what I recommend, but you should try and vary it up, especially if you're fishing a single area with more pressured fish. When jerkbait fishing, try not to overthink how you're bringing it in. As long as it looks like a fleeing bait fish will hit it. In smaller creeks, I recommend jerkbaits that are in the 1 to 2 inch range, and in large creeks and rivers, you should use jerkbaits as small as 2 inches all the way up to 5 inches. Trout will certainly hit bigger, but are less likely to. My go-to size is 3 to 4 inches. Here are some examples of jerkbaits I recommend. 3 lures I recommend you trying are the Yoziri Pins Minnow, the HT Dynamic Trout Crankbait, and the Trout Magnet Jerkbait. Let's start with the Pins Minnow. This is an excellent lure for fishing smaller creeks. If you get this lure in the 2-inch size and replace the treble hooks for single hooks, this lure can be an excellent jerkbait for small wild native streams. It's also a great lure to fool picky stocked fish. When fishing small wild streams, cast this lure upstream and constantly give the rod small twitches as you're working the lure back to you. For big stocked fish, try and spot one and cast the lure a few yards in front of the fish, working the lure right by his face, while being careful not to spook or snag him. For the dynamic crankbait, as the name implies, this lure is best used in a straight retrieve. It also works very well when you constantly twitch it. I have found this lure to work anywhere, but it's best in medium-sized creeks. Now finally, the Trout magnet jerkbait. Just like the last two, I recommend working it in a straight retrieve or constantly twitching it. Stocked fish really love this lure when you're using a straight retrieve. This lure can also be used anywhere, but it's great in medium-sized creeks like the last one. Now let's move into when you should be fishing with jerkbaits. Jerkbaits can catch trout well in almost any condition at any time of the day, but there are certainly better times to fish them. Large trout tend to really enjoy hunting down smaller trout and bait fish, and they tend to do this mostly in late afternoon and night. Jerkbaits are the most effective in the hours when it's starting to get a little darker. In the middle of the day, the trout switch to mostly feeding on bugs and are honed in on what's hatching. Trout will also tend to be more aggressive when the pressure is falling. Trout get super fired up after thunderstorms, and those sudden cold days when nobody is out can be some of your best days. Trout are also less likely to pass up a jerkbait when there's a higher discolored water. This is because it's harder for them to discern that you have an artificial lure, mostly because it changes up their feeding pattern. Finally, let's get into where you can fish jerkbaits. Since it's my go-to trout fishing method, I fish them just about anywhere, because they work just about anywhere. Wild browns that don't see fishermen every day like jerkbaits the most. My home state of Pennsylvania lists all the wild trout creeks online. Just be responsible when finding new creeks. A trout population is somewhat fragile to fishing pressure. Please do your best to keep good spots a secret. There's a reason why secret spots are the best. If you find a great new spot, I don't recommend going around telling everyone, especially trying not to post the name of the location online. Once you have found a nice location you want to try, or a place you previously fished, find a good place to park where you can access a large section of water. I park at one spot low in a creek, and I work my way up a body of water by constantly casting and moving at least a few miles throughout the day. When trout fishing, it is recommended to work your way upstream, so you're less likely to spook the fish. Fish that have sensed your presence are much less likely to chase down a jerkbait. Now let's take a look at some of the underwater footage I got of the jerkbait in action. Here we have a little trout, looks like a wild brown, chasing the jerkbait. Sadly he shook the hooks, but luckily I got the take on camera. Here we have a little native brook trout that sadly ate the jerkbait right out of the frame of the camera. Here you can barely see the moment a slightly larger brook trout takes the jerkbait. Now these aren't trout. They're some of the most common bait fish that trout forage for. These are called eastern black-nosed dace, and they're very common in my part of Pennsylvania. It's really cool watching them dart around and observe their behavior, because that's what you're trying to mimic on the jerkbait. The dynamic HD trout crankbait even has a color pattern that looks exactly like these little guys. Take a look at the top right of the screen. If you blink, you'll miss it. This little wild brown trout managed to chase down the lure and managed to free himself from the hooks. Pretty soon, you'll see my jerkbait being reeled in on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, and you can also see a little wild brown trout chasing it. On his third attempt, he was finally able to track it down, and he ate it right at the camera. Sadly, my GoPro ran out of battery when this bigger one hit. Alright guys, that's going to do it for today's video. Hopefully you guys learned something new about jerkbaits, and hopefully you can use that information to catch some giant trout with it. If you did learn something new, or if you just enjoyed the video, make sure to go down below and support me and hit that like button. If you guys want to learn anything about a different type of trout fishing, let me know in the comments below. If you have any other video ideas you'd like to see, let me know too in the comments. Pretty soon I might try to do a video where I just film underwater footage of them chasing jerkbaits or lures or flies or something. So stay tuned for that. I think it'll be really cool. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. Keep on fashing.